Hello. Welcome to the Daily Faded. My name is Hetz, and this is where we get faded daily and talk about politics and news of the day. Today is July 20th, 2020, and just want to let everyone know that I'll be not streaming on Thursday, and I'm not sure about early next week because I'm having my shoulder surgery on Thursday. Just a reminder. So I want to start off by talking a little bit about Michael Brooks, who died. And I don't know, I haven't seen any indication of how he died. And I'm really curious, and I'd really like to know. But Michael Brooks was so gifted and so intelligent and so funny and so compassionate. He did this YouTube political thing as good as anybody else and better than most people. And I don't even mean to compare myself to him because there's no comparison. But yeah, he was really an amazing commentator and an amazing political mind and a great comrade in arms for people fighting capitalism. He said just this weekend on Saturday, he posted a video on Saturday, and he said in it, quote, "Be ruthless on institutions and forgiving and kind to individuals." And I really think that that is what summed Michael up, at least from my experience of him, watching him day in and day out. I thought, wow, he just said something that wraps it all up exactly right. I like Sam Cedar, but I've always thought Michael Brooks was the bright spot on the Majority Report. And of course, the Michael Brooks Show. Relentlessly intellectual, relentlessly intelligent. And of course, he had his Lula interview, which was huge this year with former Brazilian President Lula da Silva. And he spoke about the Left Project a lot. And I like that sense of like it being a project that is above and beyond just a presidential race, for example, above and beyond one issue. Abby Martin tweeted, "Gutted to learn I lost my friend Michael Brooks today. He was not only an amazing journalist and passionate fighter for justice, he was funny, genuine, and selfless. Please tell people how much they are loved and supported because you might not get another chance. My heart hurts so much." Ben Dixon tweeted, "There was never an occasion where I did an episode with Michael Brooks and I didn't come out smarter than before we began. Every single time. The brightest flame among us." And the great bourgeois alien Beth on Twitter tweeted, "Michael Brooks brought something extraordinary to the left. There was a warmth and kindness there that was palpable and a beautiful, knowledgeable voice. I'm going to miss him more than I can possibly put into words. He was a rare, gentle, yet fierce soul. I love you, Michael." And it's easy to get really torn up and emotional over losing someone like Michael Brooks, even if you don't know him. I don't know him. I never met him. But I felt as if I knew him from watching him and listening to him. And he's one of those voices who often speaks what I'm thinking, but does so in a better, more intelligent, more eloquent way than I can possibly dream of saying it. So I just wanted to say goodbye to Michael Brooks. Rest in power, Michael Brooks. Jesus Christ, you were so young. So young. It's awful. But with that, let's get to some news. All the increases in COVID-19 today are a little bit down from what they've been the last several days. But Worldwide, we're at almost 15 million cases. 591,935 reported deaths from coronavirus around the world. 3.9 million cases here in the United States, with 62,000 today, which again, we've been averaging something around 70,000. So 62,000 is a little bit less than where we've been the last several days. And 143,792 deaths, which is 503 deaths today. That's up 0.35%. Again, we've been trending around 900 to 1,000 every day. So for the deaths today to come down to 503, I don't know if that's a reporting thing or if, it's too much, it's too little to call it a trend, obviously. We are right on the doorstep to 400,000 cases here in California, with 8,583 cases reported today, which is up almost 2.19%, and 7,761 deaths, which is, we had a death rate of 48 deaths today here in California, which again is a much lower number than the numbers we've been looking at over the last several days. Several states reported new coronavirus case counts over the weekend. New record coronavirus case counts over the weekend, as the U.S. death toll surpassed 140,000. On Fox News on Sunday, President Trump doubled down on his assertion the virus would disappear and that he'll be right eventually. Donald Trump's interview with Chris Wallace yesterday was one part moronic, one part frightening, and frankly, it was counterproductive to getting reelected. But we have more news about Trump today. I'm sure you saw this from CNN. President Donald Trump tweeted an image of himself wearing a face mask and indirectly called the act patriotic on Monday, a clear pivot away from his earlier reluctance to wear a facial covering in public. To Donald Trump wearing a face mask and tweeting about it and calling it patriotic, I don't know what else to do. So please smoke with me or have a sip of a drink or something. Quote, "We are united in our effort to defeat the invisible China virus, and many people say that it is patriotic to wear a face mask when you can't socially distance," Trump tweeted on Monday, nearly 3 months after the U.S. Absolutely, Neftali Alvarado, agree with you 100%. Rest in power, Michael Brooks. "There is nobody more patriotic than me, your favorite president," he added. Oh, so disgusting. The image appears to show Trump wearing a mask with the presidential seal at his visit to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center earlier this month, his first and only time so far donning a facial covering in public after months of refusing to be seen doing so in public amid the coronavirus pandemic. This is the interesting part of this article. The shift to encouraging mask wearing was primarily motivated by floundering poll numbers, a source familiar with the president's thinking told CNN. For months, aides tried to get Trump to wear a mask, saying they could have MAGA, Trump Pence 2020, or even the American flag printed on them, but he steadfastly refused and only wore a mask once in public. But it wasn't until a meeting with campaign aides at the White House last week, where aides bluntly told him even internal numbers showed Americans didn't approve of his response, that Trump relented, according to an official who attended that meeting. So I'm happy that the president wore a mask, and I hope it convinces some other people to wear masks. But it's really too little too late as from a leadership standpoint. It's also too little too late from a political standpoint, because Trump has already screwed up the coronavirus response so thoroughly that just putting on a mask and trying to make it look like you're responsible is definitely not enough to make up for everything that he's completely and totally fucked up. So nice try, Trump, but we're not buying it. Just a couple of news items here before I get into a longer story. Georgia State Senator Nikema Williams to replace Representative John Lewis on the ballot Williams was selected on Monday by the Georgia Democratic Party to replace the late congressman and civil rights icon on the ballot this November, according to several reports. The state senator is the first Black woman elected to lead the Georgia Democratic Party. Obviously, this is incredibly important, replacing John Lewis. I don't know much about Nikema Williams. I don't know anything about her, to tell you the truth. But we'll follow that as it develops. I'll be curious to hear more from her and see where she stands on the issues. Obviously, we lost John Lewis on Friday, as well as the great civil rights leader C.T. Vivian as well. And again, rest in power to those guys. Moving for Black Lives. Today, workers will be walking off the job. Workers walked off the job, holding a moment of silence or taking a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds as part of the strike for Black Lives. I hope this strike is a massive success. I saw some pictures of it online, so there are certainly people doing it around the country, and that was exciting to see. I'm a big believer that the United States needs to, the people of the United States need to seriously start talking about general strikes. We need to start talking about general strikes for all of the causes that are materially significant to American workers and the American middle class. Again, I'm not going to talk about him all night, but talking about Michael Brooks, he was very much into solidarity across the spectrum of the leftist project, and he was dedicated to that. And I think we all should be. Jamal Bowman officially won his race against Elliot Engel today, so that's some exciting news. We all knew it was going to happen. He really had already won the race, but Elliot Engel is the chair of the House Armed Services Committee, so he is an extremely powerful Democrat, and Jamal Bowman taking him down is going to mean a lot. It's another big win by a Justice Democrat, taking out a significant leader in the Democratic Party. So that is very exciting. And then one other point before I get into some of the stories I wanted to talk about. AOC and Eleanor Norton are introducing a bill that would require federal law enforcement officers to display identification when on duty. That's a no-brainer that they should have identification when on duty. Obviously, particularly if they're on duty in the borders of the United States. So I saw a great meme that sums up fascism really beautifully. Early warning signs of fascism: powerful and continuing nationalism, check. Disdain for human rights, check. Identification of enemies as a unifying cause, check. Supremacy of the military, check. Rampant sexism, check. Controlled mass media, check. Obsession with national security, check. Religion and government intertwined. Corporate power protected. Labor power suppressed. Disdain for intellectuals and the arts. Obsession with crime and punishment. Rampant cronyism and corruption and fraudulent elections. A few of the outlines of what fascism looks like. This is from The Guardian. Trump threatens to deploy more federal agents to protests, despite reports of violence. President brushes aside reports police have instigated violence and detained protesters without due process. Federal agents sent to confront protesters in Portland have, quote, done a fantastic job and could be deployed to other cities, Donald Trump said on Monday. The mayor of Portland has called for Trump to withdraw the federal agents, and the Oregon Attorney General has filed a lawsuit seeking the same end. The governor and the state's 2 senators, all Democrats, have also complained. Speaking in the Oval Office, the president brushed aside claims the officers are depriving people of their constitutional rights and concerns such deployments could herald an attempt by Trump to rule without Congress. Let me just say that again. Herald an attempt by Trump to rule without Congress. The largest city in Oregon has seen more than 50 nights of protest over police brutality and systemic racism arising from the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis on 25th of May. So, as things have been deteriorating in Portland and Trump has trampled on the Constitution, we have been warned that he's going to take this act to other cities, that Portland is just a test run. We should all be out in the streets over this right now. I mean, this deserves a national outcry. Federal troops on the streets of Portland, dragging people into unmarked vans. You know, people need to stop saying that Trump is almost a fascism, or that we're slipping into fascism, or that we're getting awfully close to fascism. This is fascism. We are there. There are secret police on the streets of America disappearing people into unmarked vans. We have 4% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated persons. That's a totalitarian state. That is not a free society. The government is reading everyone's emails and tracking everyone's location and phone calls. That is not freedom. We're already living in a fascist system, a militaristic, imperialistic, fascist system. In Portland, local media has stressed that the protests are not paralyzing the city and are confined to a small area, and that much of life continues as normally as possible under the coronavirus pandemic. Nonetheless, at the White House, Trump was asked if he would consider sending troops. It depended on the definition of troops, he said, adding, quote, "We are sending law enforcement." Well, when you send guys in military fatigues, it's hard to say that they're law enforcement. They look like troops. Trump seemed to refer to such plans in a controversial Fox News Sunday interview. Talking about healthcare, the president said he would soon issue a plan. I'm going to skip over that. Here's the beautiful, nonchalant discussion of what he's doing as if it's not an abuse of presidential power. Quote, "The police are afraid to do anything," he said, though Portland police have reported some federal agents acting, quote, "under their own supervision and direction, many while dressed in camouflage fatigues that make them look like regular troops." Trump continued, "We're not going to let New York and Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, Baltimore, and all of these, Oakland and California is a mess. We're not going to let this happen in our country, all run by liberal Democrats. Nobody will have done what I'm doing in the next 4 weeks," Trump told Fox News Sunday. Trump is always full of bluster and full of bullshit. And you have to have noticed the repeating pattern of making threats and then not following through on them, whether it's in foreign policy or in immigration. You know, obviously he threatened Kim Jong-un, he threatened Iran, he threatened Venezuela, and never really followed through on any of it except for the killing of Qasem Soleimani. But he didn't go to war with Iran when he was right on the edge of doing it. He likes to make big threats and then back down. It happened with the order to suspend visas for students if they don't, for students here from other countries if they don't go to a school that is physically open if they're online. Hold on, my dog is about to bark. Is he about to bark? Is he about to bark? He didn't bark. So with Trump, you never know if it's an empty threat or not. But given that they're actually testing it out on the streets of Portland, I think it's safe to assume that this is more than just an empty threat. I think it's safe to assume we're going to see something amazing and unprecedented in the next couple of weeks. Hold on, I got to stop my dogs from barking. All I have to do is shout dogs at them, and that usually shuts them up. Describing actions against protesters, which observers and officials... Sorry, I just lost my spot here. Have described as blatantly unconstitutional. Yeah, JPTV3, I don't know how he died. Going back to Michael Brooks, I don't know how he died. Anyone who's watching, please, if you're thinking about Michael Brooks tonight, please put something in the chat so that we can talk about it. There hasn't been any public discussion of how he died, so I don't have any clue on that. I wish I did know, but it is crazy. I mean, I was just watching his Jacobin video from Saturday, and it's just bizarre that he's gone. It's bizarre. Getting back to this article, these are describing actions against protesters, which observers and officials have described as blatantly unconstitutional. Trump said, "No problem. They grabbed them. A lot of people in jail. These are leaders. These people are anarchists. They're not protesters. These are people that hate our country, and we're not going to let it go forward." Claiming lawmakers in Oregon were maybe even physically afraid of the protesters, he added, "It's worse than Afghanistan." Yeah, I just saw it about an hour and a half ago, JPTV3. It's shocking. It's shocking. So all of this is hyperbole that Trump is spewing out to try and justify his illegal renditions on the streets of Portland. I think it's really important to remember that the protests in Portland and the active area of protests is a very small part of the city. It's interesting because if you look on threads about this, inevitably there are some Trumpers on there posing as Oregon residents and saying that they're so happy that Trump is taking care of it. But don't believe that for a second. People in Oregon are radical, and I love that about Oregon. Just look at Mike Figueredo, for example, who also had a really powerful tweet about Michael Brooks. Around 60% of Americans support Black Lives Matter and agree that the George Floyd killing was completely terrible. Yeah, I'll try to. Beatles, 95. Sudden medical condition, Mighty Mouse. Yeah. Obviously, give his family some time. Wouldn't want to intrude on that in any way, shape, or form. So let me finish this, and then I'll jump right into that, Beatles 95. So Trump is simply trying to distract. It's simply political. And I think what really stands out in this situation is look how far Trump is willing to go just to play a political game. Look at what he's willing to do with executive power. Look how blatantly he's willing to rip up the Constitution, which he obviously has never read and doesn't understand and doesn't care about. It's frightening. It's truly frightening. Anyway, so Beatles 95, you said, could you talk about the importance of scientific literacy as it relates to anti-maskers and pseudoscience? So I actually, in my previous life, was a film and television producer. And I produced a film called Something the Lord Made for HBO many years ago. And it's about the two men who invented heart surgery. And the movie was pretty successful. And I'm very proud of it. Please check it out if you have HBO Go. It's called Something the Lord Made, starring Mos Def and Alan Rickman, who was a good friend. And because of that movie, I was invited to speak at the scientific sessions of the American Heart Association in Dallas in 2005, I think. And I actually spoke on this very subject because at the time I was very concerned about what the Bush administration, how the Bush administration was ignoring global warming, how the Bush administration was had absolutely no respect for science, and I talked in that talk. I don't remember it all that well now. Yeah, Mighty Mouse, I'm sorry that Trump is so frightening. And I'm sorry that he got elected. I'm sorry to the whole world about Donald Trump. But unfortunately, he's a part of a bigger problem here in the United States. He's a symbol of a bigger problem. Anyway, so what the point that I was trying to make is that you can't change the science. The science is what the science is. Obviously, it changes through the scientific method, but the science is what the science is. And if you choose to ignore it, all you're doing is creating suffering and ruin for yourself and for the country if you're the president. So it was shocking how little regard Bush seemed to have for science, and that is nothing compared to where we are today with the complete disregard for science that we see not only from the president but in a large segment of society. Hold on, I got to get my dog to stop barking. The anti-vaxxers were already a strong movement before Trump was elected president. So whatever happened with this pandemic, there were going to be a lot of people talking about the vaccine and fascism and eugenics. No, it's true. It's true, fascism and eugenics. Look at the racial component to look at racial capitalism in the United States and look at the racial component to the emergent fascism in the United States. Obviously, Trump is siding against. Obviously, Trump is siding against. Sorry, I just got distracted by something. And I just completely lost track of what I was saying. So I'm going to smoke again. If you're new to the show, please join me, have a smoke or have a sip of something. But, all totalitarian regimes have a eugenics component because they all have a racial component. And there's always an effort to perpetuate an underclass, and the best way to create an underclass is to tie them to a racialized understanding of the underclass, so that you can divide workers and create animus among those who should have solidarity with one another. And I'm going to use this as a jumping off point into my last story for tonight. From the New York Times today, China is using Uyghur labor to produce face masks. So obviously, China is a homogeneous society. Well, it's not. It's actually a very heterogeneous society. But the ruling power in China is restricted to only to the ethnic majority in China. As the coronavirus pandemic continues to drive demand for personal protective equipment, Chinese companies are rushing to manufacture the gear for domestic and global consumption. A New York Times investigation has found that some of these companies are using Uyghur labor through a contentious government-sponsored program that experts say often puts people to work against their will. Hey, look, someone's spamming chat. Thanks a lot. Have a smoke, brother, and be well. I hope you always have housing, healthcare, food, and education. Excuse me, I have to block this fucker. Sorry about that. Uyghurs are a largely Muslim ethnic minority, primarily from the Xinjiang region of northwest China. The program sends Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities into factory and service jobs. Now their labor is part of the PPE supply chain. According to China's National Medical Products Administration, only 4 companies in Xinjiang produced medical-grade protective equipment before the pandemic. As of June 30th, that number was 51. After reviewing state media reports and public records, the Times found that at least 17 of those companies participate in the labor transfer program. The companies produce equipment primarily for domestic use, but the Times identified several other companies outside Xinjiang that use Uyghur labor and export globally. We traced a shipment of face masks to a medical supply company in the U.S. state of Georgia from a factory in China's Hubei province, where more than 100 Uyghur workers had been sent. The workers are required to learn Mandarin and pledge their loyalty to China at weekly flag-raising ceremonies. So, thank you, Nick. Yes, trolled by I can't even say his screen name, for Christ's sake. Look, I'm of two minds about this story. Obviously, I am appalled at what China is doing in ethnically cleansing the Uyghur Muslims and putting them into re-education camps. That is terrifying, and it's something that the international community has been far too silent about. And I think that comes down to the control asserted over the world by the West, by Europe and the United States, and the very anti-Muslim agenda means that people don't need to speak out about it. People don't need to talk about it. How many times have you heard any Democrats or Republicans in the United States talk about the Uyghurs? I mean, I've heard Bernie Sanders talk about them, and that's about it. And that comes directly out of the white supremacy of our empire and our regime. But on the flip side of this, the United States is hardly in any position to criticize China on this, given that we have people in camps as well, and given that we employ slave labor in our prison system. We have an amendment that codifies slave labor as legal for incarcerated persons to be forced to do. So that was a huge source of labor in the South as it began to industrialize after the period of Reconstruction. And so we've got a terrible record on this. And let's face it, the 50% of the American workforce that's making $30,000 a year or less, are they not also forced workers? They are forced into conditions of, working for a wage that is not possible to live on. And, McDonald's and Visa put out a sample budget for how you could survive on $8.25 an hour. And it's just absurd. They budgeted $600 for a housing payment. They included a second job, so your income from your first job, presumably McDonald's, is $1,105. Income from your second job is 955 hours. So you better be fucking working 80 hours a week if you want an apartment. On this crazy ass budget, they put mortgage and rent in for $600. I don't know anybody who pays $600 for mortgage or rent. The car payment at $150, that's probably driving Fred Flintstone's car and using your feet. $0 for heating, $100 for cable and phone. This is the most offensive. And then they claim you have $800 in monthly spending money, which translates to $27 a day, but they don't count food as an expense. It's crazy. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. I will not be streaming on Thursday night because of my shoulder surgery. Stop working at Arby's. Okay, we're getting trolled again. I love it. I won't be streaming on Thursday, but please check in tomorrow night at 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Pacific. I think this is the same person back again. So, all right, dude, just go away. Anyway, peace out. Thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow night.